The stars shimmered like ice crystals scattered across velvet blackness, each one ancient and silent. Humanity had grown accustomed to their quiet witness. Generations had gazed upward, hoping for an answer, hoping that somewhere out there, another voice was listening. For centuries, the sky was mute. Then, on a night like any other, the silence ended. It was not a warship or a fleet that arrived. It was a sound. In the control chamber of the deep space listening array on the far side of the moon, the analysts worked through their usual rotation. The array had been running for decades, scooping whispers from the cosmos, most of them nothing more than static, pulsars, or fragments of cosmic background radiation. But tonight, the instruments shifted from background hum into something strange. A repeating pattern, structured, intentional. Specialist Imani Kavita leaned forward, her eyes narrowing as she adjusted the display. She had listened to countless false alarms, tricks of interference, and errant signals from forgotten satellites. This was different. The structure of the pulses resembled mathematics, pure and simple. Ratios aligned with prime numbers, harmonic intervals that spoke not of accident but of design. Her heart pounded. "This is not natural," she whispered. Her colleague, Tomas Evers, gave her a doubtful look until he too leaned closer, listening to the sequence of tones. It repeated every 12 seconds, and every iteration grew more complex, as though the sender was building a ladder of thought, offering anyone listening a way to climb upward toward meaning. Within hours, the signal was confirmed by other stations across Earth orbit and even by the Martian observatories. No one doubted it anymore. An intelligence was calling. The world trembled. For months the signal continued, weaving its pattern outward, a beacon of urgency. It was not a greeting, not really. As the mathematical codes were unraveled, the message within grew clearer. There was desperation in the structure, a cry, not for trade, not for curiosity, but for survival. Humanity debated. Governments argued, religious leaders proclaimed, and scientists worked without sleep. But beneath all the conflict, one truth became undeniable. Whoever was sending this was alive, somewhere out there, and they needed help. The signal originated from a distant system, 32 light-years away, within a cluster of stars that Earth's astronomers had catalogued but never studied in detail. In those stars, life struggled, and it was calling to the only species that had answered. Humanity faced a choice: turn away, hide from responsibility, or take the first true step into a universe where they were no longer alone. Captain Elias Morgan sat in the command chamber of the vessel Resolute. Unlike the vessels that had ferried explorers to Mars or Europa, Resolute was the first of her kind, an interstellar ship designed not for war, but for endurance. Built within the orbital shipyards above Earth, she was the culmination of generations of dreaming, her engines capable of folding space in ways once considered fantasy. She was to be a ship of discovery, not conquest, and now discovery would come with responsibility. Elias studied the crew assembled before him, humans from every continent, selected for courage, for empathy, for skill. Engineers, linguists, doctors, farmers, scientists, and guardians. This was not just a crew of explorers, it was a delegation of humanity itself. If another species awaited them, humanity would arrive not with guns blazing but with hands open. "We all know what is at stake," Elias said, his voice steady but carrying weight. "We have listened to their call. They are suffering. We have the means to reach them. When history looks back, let it be said that when the first chance came to prove our place among the stars, humanity did not hesitate." The faces before him reflected a mixture of awe and fear, but above all, determination. The journey was not instant. Though the Resolute's engines bent the distances between stars, the voyage took months. Time enough for the crew to wonder who awaited them, time enough for Earth to debate the wisdom of their mission. Politicians still argued on the feeds, questioning the risk of aiding strangers. But the Resolute pressed on, wrapped in the silence of interstellar night, carrying with it the collective hope of billions. When at last they arrived, the system blazed before them. Twin suns burned in brilliant tandem, and around one of them spun a green and blue world scarred with glimmering fire. The sensors brought the image to life across the vessel's great displays, continents dotted with smoke, cities in ruin, vast oceans littered with strange flotillas, as if entire populations had fled from land to water. "Life signs confirmed," said Specialist Kavita, her voice breaking the silence of the bridge. "There are millions alive down there, maybe more. Bring us into orbit," Captain Elias commanded. The vessel descended into the planet's shadow, slipping into orbit high above a world at war with itself. Not human war, but something stranger. Vast shapes moved across the atmosphere, dark silhouettes with wings that shimmered like mirrors, beasts of impossible scale blotting out the skies. From below, energy bursts and crude weapons fired upward, streaking hopelessly against the Leviathans. And then came the first voice. Not a signal this time, not a sequence of numbers, a voice. It trembled across the translator systems, carrying with it tones both alien and familiar. "You came, by the stars you came." The bridge fell silent. "Who are you?" Captain Elias asked, speaking toward the comms. The reply came after a pause, filled with exhaustion and hope. "We are called the Talia. We have endured much, but we can endure no longer. If you truly come from beyond, if you carry strength in your hands, we beg you, save us from the devourers." On the view screens, one of the winged leviathans swooped low over a burning city. Its scales shimmered with unnatural light, and beneath its shadow thousands fled. The crew of the Resolute stared in horror. Humanity had come searching for a neighbor. Instead, they had found a plea for salvation. Captain Elias gathered his officers in the central chamber. The air was heavy with urgency. "We came as explorers," he said, "but we cannot stand by and watch an entire people be destroyed. Yet we must be careful. We do not know the nature of these devourers, nor the balance of this world." Imani Kavita spoke first. "Their signal was designed to reach us. They must have known the risk of calling strangers. They would not have sent it if they had any other choice." Dr. Amina Javed, the mission's lead medic, nodded grimly. "Their wounds will be terrible, physical and cultural. If we do not help them now, they may not survive long enough for us to debate the ethics." Others added their voices, some with caution, some with conviction. But in the end, silence fell and all eyes turned to Elias. He drew a long breath. "Then it is decided. Humanity came to the stars not only to seek knowledge, but to prove that we are worthy of the gift of existence. If the Talia call us allies, then allies we shall be." Far below, the cities of the Talia burned. Above, a single human vessel prepared to write the first chapter of a new story, one where humankind would be remembered not for conquest, but for courage. And so the age of silence ended. The ship Resolute hung in the orbit of a wounded world. From the bridge windows, the crew could see the lines of flame etched across the continents, like scars carved by the hand of a god. Columns of smoke spiraled into the skies. The oceans glistened with fleets of makeshift vessels, straining to hold the thousands who had fled the land. It was a world still alive, but only barely. The voice that had reached them moments earlier returned, softer now, as though weakened. "Strangers from beyond the night, we welcome you. We are the Talia. We are the last children of our world. If you can hear us, then we are not yet forgotten." The translator strained to keep up with the alien tongue. It rendered words with a kind of poetry that seemed inherent to the Talia language. The cadence carried sorrow, but also dignity. Captain Elias rose from his chair, his voice steady. "We hear you. We are human, from a world called Earth. We came because you asked for help. Tell us what threatens you." The reply arrived after a long pause, as though the speaker had to gather courage to speak the name of their enemy. "They are called the Devourers. They are not of this world. They came from the void generations ago, falling from the skies like a storm of teeth and wings. They do not speak. They do not reason. They take. They consume. Our people have fought them with every weapon we have, but for every one we strike down, another rises from their nests. We are being unmade. Our histories are being eaten." The crew of the Resolute listened in silence. The Devourers were not conquerors seeking territory. nor invaders seeking resources that could be bargained for. They were a force of consumption, a hunger given form. Elias turned to his officers. "Prepare a shuttle. We need to meet them face to face. I want to see who we have come to save." The shuttle descended through the thickening clouds, its hull buffeted by turbulent winds carrying ash and soot. From above, the human crew saw glimpses of the planet's beauty hidden beneath its scars. Vast plains stretched like green seas, and towering crystalline mountains caught the sun's light with brilliance. Rivers carved silver lines across the continents, yet everywhere destruction marred the splendor. Whole forests lay in ruin, trees burned down to jagged stumps. Cities once proud and complex were reduced to rubble, their towers shattered, their streets strewn with the wreckage of flight. As the shuttle descended toward a surviving stronghold, the crew saw their first true sight of the Thalia. They were gathered on a plateau of dark stone, thousands of them. Tall figures, their forms lithe and graceful, clothed in fabrics that shimmered like woven light. Their faces were elongated, their eyes large and luminous, carrying within them the strange glimmer of twin reflections, the mark, perhaps, of living under two suns. Some bore intricate markings on their skin, faintly glowing lines that traced across their temples and down their arms, like the rivers of their world etched into their very bodies. But their majesty was diminished by exhaustion. Many bore wounds hastily bandaged. Others leaned upon walking staffs. Children clung to their elders, wide-eyed and frightened. And overhead, the shadow of a distant devourer circled, its wings glittering like shards of glass as it searched for prey. The shuttle touched down, its ramp lowered with a hiss of atmosphere. Captain Elias stepped forward, flanked by Dr. Javed and Specialist Kavita. The crowd of Thalia fell silent, watching as the first humans in history set foot upon their soil. From among them, a figure emerged, tall even among her people, her robes tattered yet still bearing the sigils of authority. Her skin markings glowed faintly, pulsing with each word she spoke. "I am Sarethi, keeper of the remaining. You came. The stars did not lie. You are real." Elias bowed his head respectfully. "We came because you asked. We are not warriors by nature, but we will not turn away from those who suffer. Tell us, Keeper Sarethi, what can we do?" Her great eyes shimmered with emotion. "Stand with us. That will be enough. Our people need hope as much as we need weapons. If we see that another world has answered our call, then perhaps the devourers will not claim us all." The hours that followed were filled with exchange. The Thalia shared what history they still preserved. The devourers had descended more than a century ago, from vessels that fell burning from the sky. At first the Thalia thought them to be explorers, as the humans were now, but soon the truth emerged. The creatures swarmed like locusts, building nests within mountains and spreading across the land. They consumed everything, forests stripped bare, animals hunted to extinction, cities torn apart for their stone and metal. The Thalia had fought with determination, wielding energy weapons powered by the crystals of their mountains, but their resources dwindled. Their knowledge fractured as their great libraries fell. For every victory, they paid with devastation. Their numbers dwindled. Sarethi's voice trembled as she spoke. "We have always believed we were alone in the stars. When the devourers came, we thought them demons. When we sent our signal, we did not truly believe anyone would answer. But you did." She fixed her gaze on Elias. "Tell me, human from Earth, are there others like you among the stars, or are you alone as we thought ourselves to be?" Elias considered his words carefully. "We do not know yet. You are the first we have met. But if there are others, we will search for them. We will not let the night remain silent." At this, a murmur passed through the crowd of Thalia, a flicker of hope, fragile but real. Later, as the humans returned to the shuttle, Dr. Javed spoke quietly. "Their wounds are worse than we thought. Malnutrition, infection, even collapse from exhaustion. Their healers are overwhelmed. If we want them to survive long enough to rebuild, we need to set up medical camps immediately." Specialist Kavita added, "And their records, what remains of them, show that the devourers breed within their nests at terrifying speed. If we do not find a way to slow that cycle, The Talia will drown in numbers alone. Captain Elias stood on the plateau, watching the distant Leviathan circling. Its cry echoed across the horizon, a sound that was neither animal nor machine, but something in between. "We came here to discover," he said softly, "but it seems the universe has given us a trial instead. If humanity is to prove itself worthy of the stars, this is where it begins. We will save them, or we will fall beside them trying." That night within the ruins of the Talia stronghold, the humans shared food with their hosts. The alien children stared in fascination at the strange shapes of the human rations, and the humans in turn marveled at the glowing fruits offered in return. For a moment, laughter returned to a place where grief had reigned too long. Yet beyond the fires of that fragile camp, the shadows moved. The Devourers had scented new prey. The first attack would come before dawn. The twin suns had not yet risen when the air grew heavy. The plateau where the humans had landed rested in silence, the kind of silence that is not peace but warning. The Talia slept in clustered groups, huddled together for warmth against the chill of night. A few sentries stood watch with long spears that glowed faintly at their tips, eyes scanning the dark horizon. Captain Elias was awake. He could not sleep. The stories of the Devourers had haunted him since Sarethi spoke them. They were no army that might be reasoned with. They were no nation that might negotiate terms. They were hunger given form, and hunger could not be bargained with. He stood beside the shuttle, the stars still faintly visible above, when Specialist Kavita approached. She carried a hand terminal filled with the latest scans. "Captain," she whispered, "I do not like what I am seeing. There is movement beneath the surface, tunnels stretching for kilometers, entire networks that branch out from the mountains. It looks like the Devourers have burrowed into the planet itself. They are not just occupying this world, they are becoming it." Elias's jaw tightened. "Then every hour we delay gives them another chance to spread." Before more could be said, a sound cut through the night. A cry, distant but terrible, like metal tearing against stone. The Talia sentries stiffened. The sound came again, closer this time. The Devourers were near. The first shape appeared on the horizon, wings glimmering faintly as they caught the starlight. Its body was long, serpentine, armored with jagged scales that shimmered like broken glass. Its many legs clutched the ground as it crawled forward, while its wings unfurled and carried it into the air. Its head was no face at all, only a mass of mandibles that clicked and clattered in grotesque rhythm. Behind it came another, and another. By the time the suns began to rise, there were dozens. The Talia roused in panic, their cries echoing through the camp. Mothers clutched children, elders pulled younger ones to safety. The warriors of the Talia formed a line with their glowing spears, though the fear in their eyes betrayed them. Captain Elias barked orders into his comms. "All human crew to defensive stations. Dr. Javed, get your medics ready, we will have wounded. Kavita, bring the shuttle's weapons online." For the first time, humanity faced the Devourers not in story, but in flesh. The attack came swiftly. One of the creatures dove, wings slicing through the air with a deafening crack. Its body crashed into the defensive line, scattering Talia warriors like leaves. The mandibles tore through stone, sending shards flying. But the humans were ready. From the shuttle, mounted cannons opened fire. Streams of energy lashed outward, striking the beast in its chest. It shrieked, a sound that rattled bones, and collapsed in a heap of thrashing limbs. For a heartbeat, the Talia stared in awe. The humans had felled a devourer in a single volley. But more came. A swarm descended, dozens of wings blotting the light of dawn. They landed with thunderous impact, tearing into stone, clawing at the defenders. The ground quaked with their numbers. Captain Elias drew his weapon, a compact rifle designed for survival, not war. He fired at the nearest creature, the pulse striking its eye cluster and sending it reeling. "Hold the line," he shouted. "Stand together." The Talia rallied, emboldened by the sight of the humans fighting at their side. Their glowing spears struck true, piercing between scales. Yet for every creature that fell, another leapt forward, mandibles gnashing. The air filled with screams. Dr. Javed worked tirelessly among the wounded. Talia warriors were dragged back with torn limbs, their glowing markings dimming as life slipped away. Human medics rushed beside her, applying field bandages, administering stimulants, even improvising with alien herbs when supplies ran low. One young Talia child had been struck by flying stone, her body limp. Dr. Javed knelt beside her, pressing to find a pulse. For a moment she feared the worst, until the child's eyes flickered open, glowing faintly. The doctor smiled through her exhaustion. "Stay with me, little one. Humanity has not come across light years to lose you now." The battle raged for hours, though time felt meaningless. The plateau became a wasteland of scorched stone and shattered corpses. Finally, as the second sun reached its height, the swarm broke. The devourers pulled back, their wings carrying them into the mountains. They left behind their dead, the ground littered with grotesque bodies that shimmered faintly as if dissolving into dust. The silence that followed was not peace, but reprieve. The Talia looked upon the humans with something new in their eyes, not only awe, not only gratitude, but belief. For the first time in generations, the devourers had been repelled with strength that matched their own. Keeper Sarethi approached, her robes torn and stained, yet her bearing still regal. She placed her hand upon Captain Elia's shoulder. Her luminous eyes glistened. "You have done in a single dawn what we have not done in 100 years. You have shown us that the devourers can bleed. You have given us back the word we thought lost." Elias's voice was hoarse. "What word is that?" She smiled faintly. "Victory." That night, the camp burned with firelight, but it was not the fire of ruin. It was the fire of survival. The Talia sang, their voices weaving through the air in harmonies that seemed to merge with the very wind. The humans sat among them, exhausted, sharing food and drink. For a moment, the war felt distant, as though this fragile union had already reshaped destiny. Yet Captain Elias could not rest. He stood apart, staring toward the dark mountains where the swarm had fled. His heart told him this was only the beginning. The devourers would not forget, and neither would humanity. For the first time in history, humans had fought not for themselves, but for another world. They had shed blood for strangers, and in doing so, they had bound their fates together. Tomorrow, the war would grow. Tomorrow, the devourers would return in greater numbers. But tonight, around the fire of a shattered plateau, hope had been reborn. The plateau was quiet after the battle, but it was not the silence of despair this time. It was the hush that follows exhaustion, the pause before choices must be made. The devourers had withdrawn, their corpses dissolving into dust that the wind carried away, leaving behind only the memory of their grotesque shapes. The humans and the Talia gathered in what remained of the stronghold's council chamber. Once it had been a place of carved stone walls and high crystal windows that caught the sun's light. Now the windows were shattered, the walls cracked, and the floor blackened by fire. Yet within those ruins, the seeds of something greater were being sown. Captain Elias stood before the assembly. Beside him were Dr. Javed, Specialist Kavita, and Lieutenant Mek, the crew's tactical officer. Opposite them stood Keeper Sarethi and a circle of Talia elders, each bearing the luminous markings of their people. The chamber was filled with warriors, healers, and even children who listened from the shadows. Everyone understood the weight of this gathering. Elias began with simple words. "You asked for help. We have seen your enemy, and we know now what you face. The devourers are not undefeatable. We have proven that much. But to save your people, we must do more than defend. We must strike at the heart of their swarm." A murmur spread through the Talia. Some voices trembled with hope, others with fear. One of the elders, his markings faint with age, spoke in a tone filled with sorrow. "We have tried. We have burned their nests, shattered their burrows, collapsed the mountains upon them. For every nest destroyed, two more rise. They are endless." Lieutenant Mek stepped forward. His voice carried the cold precision of a soldier. "Endless, no, every swarm has a source. Insects on Earth, ants, termites, even locusts, can overwhelm entire landscapes, but they all depend on queens, on central nodes of reproduction. If these devourers are creatures of hunger, then they too must have a source. Find it, destroy it, and their numbers will collapse. Specialist Kavita tapped her device, projecting an image into the air. It showed the mountain ranges surrounding the plateau, vast structures of crystal and stone. Our scans confirm what we suspected. The largest heat signatures come from a cavern deep beneath Mount Isorith, 200 kilometers east of here. The tunnels branch outward from that site like veins from a heart. If there is a central nest, this is it. The chamber fell into heavy silence. All eyes turned to Keeper Sarethi. Her gaze was steady, though pain lingered in her eyes. Mount Isorith, we called it the Throne of Dawn. It was once sacred to us. Now it is a wound in our world, bleeding out everything we love. If you are right, then perhaps the gods themselves sent you here to end this. Plans were drawn late into the night. The Talia described what little they knew of the mountain. Swarms nested within caverns large enough to hold cities. Strange, luminous growths coated the walls, feeding the devourers with energy that seemed drawn from the very stone. At the mountain's heart, they spoke of a shape too vast to comprehend, a mother of the swarm, perhaps, or something even more alien. None who had gone there had returned. The humans offered their technology. Portable shields to protect against the creature's claws, weapons that concentrated energy into precision strikes, medical supplies to keep the wounded alive. The Talia offered knowledge of terrain, paths through valleys hidden from aerial patrols, and weapons forged from their crystals that could disrupt the creature's shimmering scales. A combined strike was proposed, a joint force of human crew and Talia warriors, small enough to move quickly, but strong enough to deliver a decisive blow. The rest of the Talia would remain in the stronghold, protected by the shuttle's defenses until the strike team returned. "Return," murmured one of the children listening from the shadows. "They must return." Keeper Sarethi bent down, touching the child's brow gently. "They will. We will make sure of it." As the suns rose, preparations began. Talia warriors sharpened their spears and infused them with crystalline cores that glowed with inner fire. Human engineers checked the shuttle's weapon pods and loaded portable generators for the shields. Dr. Javed packed medical kits until her arms ached. Captain Elias walked among them, speaking with both species. He listened to the Talia's fears, to his crew's doubts. He reminded them of what they had accomplished together already. His voice was quiet, but it carried. "This is not only about survival, it is about meaning. If we defeat the Devourers, the Talia will endure, and humanity will prove that our place among the stars is not taken by force, but earned through courage. We will not fail." Keeper Sarethi stood beside him, her luminous eyes fixed on her people. "We are no longer alone. For the first time in a century, we fight not as the last of the Talia, but as allies of another world. Let that truth be our shield." That evening, as the strike team prepared to depart, a small group of Talia children gathered at the shuttle's ramp. They offered tokens made of crystal shards bound with twine. "For protection," one child whispered. Elias accepted the token, tying it to his wrist. His voice softened. "I will carry it with me, and I will carry your hope." The engines ignited, and the shuttle lifted into the sky, carrying with it warriors of two species bound by a common cause. The stronghold fell away beneath them, shrinking into a cluster of lights surrounded by endless shadow. Ahead, Mount Isorith loomed, its jagged peaks catching the fading sun's glow. From its sides poured rivers of smoke and faint glimmers of unnatural light. Even from this distance, the mountain seemed alive, breathing, watching. Dr. Javed whispered to no one in particular, "That is no mountain, that is a hive." And so humanity and the Talia set their course toward the heart of the swarm, toward the place where destiny itself waited. Yet deep within the caverns of Mount Isorith, the Devourers stirred. The swarm had felt the sting of resistance, the loss of countless kin, and in the heart of the hive, something vast and ancient shifted in its slumber. The war was only beginning. The shuttle skimmed low over broken terrain, weaving between jagged ridges and valleys shrouded in smoke. Below, the land bore the scars of endless war, forests reduced to skeletal husks, rivers choked with ash, plains gouged into trenches where devourers had tunneled outward from their hive. The closer they drew to Mount Isorith, the more the earth seemed consumed, as if life itself recoiled from the mountain's shadow. Inside the shuttle, the strike force prepared. The humans checked their rifles, adjusting power cells and calibrating energy emitters. Lieutenant Merck instructed the Talia warriors on how to use the portable shield generators, devices that emitted shimmering barriers strong enough to deflect even the claws of a devourer for a few precious seconds. The Talia, in turn, demonstrated how their crystalline spears could resonate with harmonic frequencies to fracture the creature's scales. It was an exchange of survival skills, born not of trust alone but necessity. Each side leaned on the other, and in that leaning, a bond began to grow. Captain Elias walked the narrow aisle between the warriors, meeting their eyes one by one. He paused beside Sarethi, who sat silently with her spear across her knees. "You should be in the stronghold," Elias said softly. "Your people need you alive." Her eyes glowed faintly in the dim light. "My people also need me unafraid. If I hide while others fight, what hope can I give them?" "No, Captain. If this is the end of the Talia, then I will face it where it matters most, at the heart of the swarm." Elias studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Then we face it together." The shuttle landed in a narrow ravine near the base of Mount Isorith. The air here was heavy with a strange musk, thick and acrid, like the breath of something ancient and foul. The ground vibrated faintly beneath their boots, as though the mountain itself was alive, pulsing with the heartbeat of the hive. The warriors disembarked quickly, moving into defensive positions while Specialist Kavita set up a relay beacon. The mountain loomed above them, its cliffs streaked with black and crimson mineral veins that glowed faintly, casting eerie light across the valley. From cracks in the rock seeped streams of luminous spores, drifting like pale fireflies before vanishing into the air. Lieutenant Merck scanned the terrain. Entrance detected 200 meters ahead, large enough for a creature to emerge, strong energy signatures within. The Talia warriors muttered prayers under their breath. The entrance gaped before them, a jagged wound in the rock. The edges pulsed faintly, as though the stone had fused with flesh. From within came a constant clicking, a sound that made even hardened soldiers shiver. Elias raised his rifle. "Form ranks, shields in front, spears behind, rifles on the flanks. Once we're inside, we keep moving. If we stop, they will surround us." The strike force advanced into the darkness. The tunnels swallowed them. Inside, the hive was not stone alone, but something fused, rock and resin, crystal and chitin, as if the devourers had reshaped the mountain into their own image. The walls glistened with a slick substance that pulsed faintly with light, illuminating their way. Strange growths sprouted from the floors and ceilings, pulsing sacs filled with bioluminescent liquid that cast shifting shadows. Every sound echoed, the scrape of boots, the whisper of breath, the faint hum of weapons, and always beneath it, the steady clicking, like countless mandibles waiting just out of sight. Dr. Javed murmured, "This is worse than any nightmare." Sarethi replied softly, "This is what we have lived with for generations." They pressed deeper. The tunnels widened into caverns, vast chambers filled with nests woven from hardened resin. Within them lay eggs, thousands, each one glowing faintly, their shells translucent. Inside, vague shapes twitched and writhed. The Talia warriors hissed in revulsion. One of them raised his spear to smash an egg, but Elias caught his arm. "Not yet," he said. "If we start destroying now, they will know we are here. We need to reach the heart." Reluctantly, the warrior lowered his weapon. They moved on. The deeper they went, the more grotesque the hive became. Pits opened into darkness below, filled with writhing larvae that squirmed in masses. Veins of crystal had been hollowed out and filled with resin, pulsing with strange energy. At times, the tunnels narrowed so tightly that the warriors had to crawl, their armor scraping against slick walls. It was there, in those narrow passages, that the swarm struck. A shriek echoed through the tunnels, and from the darkness ahead burst a wave of smaller creatures, no larger than wolves, but swift and savage. Their bodies were sleek, armored, their mouths filled with rows of teeth that clicked in unison. "Shields forward," Elias shouted. The humans activated their portable barriers, shimmering walls of energy springing up just as the first wave crashed into them. Claws screeched against the shields, mandibles snapped, and sparks flew. Rifles blazed, spears stabbed, and the tunnels filled with light and fury. The swarm pressed harder, bodies piling against the shields, forcing the strike team back step by step. Lieutenant Mech cursed, firing until his rifle overheated. "We cannot hold them here." Sarethi raised her spear, which glowed brilliantly as she drove it into the ground. The resonance rippled outward, a wave of harmonic energy that shattered the creatures' scales. They shrieked in agony, staggering back long enough for the rifles to finish them off. The survivors scattered into the dark. Breathing heavily, Elias glanced around at his team. A few were wounded, but none had fallen. He nodded to Sarethi. "Your weapon saved us." She gave a faint smile. "It was your shield that bought me time." Hours passed as they pressed deeper. Each cavern revealed more horror, nests stacked upon nests, rivers of resin carrying nutrients through the hive, towering pillars of chitin that seemed to pulse with life. The air grew hotter, thicker, and the musk more suffocating. At last, they reached a vast chamber. It stretched beyond sight, its ceiling lost in shadow. The walls glowed with pulsating light, and in the center lay a shape so immense it defied comprehension. A mass of chitin and flesh, fused with stone, stretching upward like a mountain within a mountain. From its surface sprouted endless tubes that fed the eggs around it. Its form shifted slowly, breathing, birthing, dreaming, the heart of the swarm, the mother of the devourers. The strike team froze, struck silent by its enormity. The sound of its breathing filled the chamber, each exhalation a storm. Specialist Kavita whispered that thing could cover a city. Lieutenant Mech's face was grim. "If we do not end it here, the Talia are finished." Elias lifted his rifle, but did not fire. "We need to hit it with everything we have, all at once. Shields at maximum. Warriors in front, we strike as one." Sarethi raised her spear, her luminous eyes reflecting the monstrous shape. "Then let this be the dawn of freedom." They prepared to unleash their fury, and then the mother opened its eyes. Two vast orbs, glowing like molten stars, snapped open in the darkness. The hive had awakened. The eyes of the mother opened, vast and molten, filling the chamber with a light that seemed to come not from fire, but from a deeper, crueler source. The air shuddered. A low, resonant vibration rippled through the walls of the hive, and suddenly the steady clicking that had haunted the tunnels became a thunderous chorus. The swarm knew they were here. The strike force braced themselves. Shields flared, spears glowed, rifles powered up. The mountain itself seemed to awaken against them. The mother stirred, its colossal bulk shifting. Tubes tore free from the walls with wet cracks, spraying bioluminescent fluid across the chamber. From the shadows above poured thousands of creatures, their bodies sleek and glistening, their wings shimmering like glass. The air filled with shrieks as they descended in waves. Captain Elias shouted above the din. "Hold formation, strike as one." The battle erupted. The first wave smashed into the shields, claws raking against energy barriers, mandibles snapping. The force of impact drove the humans and Talia back a step, boots grinding against resin-slick stone. Rifles fired in blinding bursts, cutting down swathes of creatures, while spears resonated with piercing notes that cracked scales and splintered armor. Dr. Javed ducked behind a shield, dragging a wounded Talia warrior to cover. Blood glowed faintly from his wound, luminous against her hands. She worked swiftly, sealing the injury with a coagulant. "Stay with me. You will see the suns again." Specialist Kavita fired from the flank, her rifle cutting a path through the swarm. "They keep coming. There is no end." Lieutenant Mech's voice was iron. "The mother is the key. We have to bring it down, or we die here." The mother shifted again, releasing a thunderous bellow that rattled the chamber. The sound was not merely noise, but pressure, a force that bent the air and made every warrior stagger. Cavities opened along its body, spewing clouds of spores that clung to the skin and burned like acid. Several Talia screamed, their luminous markings flaring and then dimming as they collapsed. Sarethi raised her spear high, its crystal core blazing with light. She drove it into the ground, releasing a harmonic wave that rippled outward, dispersing the spores. Her voice rang above the chaos. "Strike the heart, strike now." Elias seized the moment. All fire on the core. The strike force unleashed everything they had. Energy rifles carved searing lines across the mother's body, blasting open chitin to reveal raw, pulsing flesh beneath. Talia's spears struck in unison, sending fractures through the creature's armored hide. Explosive charges hurled by human engineers detonated in bursts of fire, shaking the cavern. The mother shrieked, its molten eyes narrowing, its vast form convulsing, but the swarm did not relent. From hidden tunnels, larger creatures emerged, behemoths with multiple limbs, their bodies armored like living fortresses. They lumbered into the fray, scattering warriors with sweeping blows. One crashed through a human shield barrier, its claw impaling a soldier before anyone could react. Blood sprayed across the stone. Elia's roar echoed in fury. He leapt forward, rifle blazing, driving the creature back step by step until it collapsed in a heap of twitching limbs. He dragged the fallen soldier aside, teeth clenched. No more losses today. The battle raged on, the chamber becoming a storm of light and shadow, fire and blood. At the center of it all, the mother's molten eyes fixed upon Elias. He felt the weight of that gaze, vast and alien, pressing into his mind. It was not thought, not language, but hunger, endless, insatiable hunger. It was not a creature that could be reasoned with. It was an abyss that consumed meaning itself. But Elias did not flinch. He raised his rifle and fired until its barrel glowed red. "We are not your feast." "Not anymore," the mother convulsed as another volley tore through its body. The chamber shook violently, cracks spreading through the walls. Spores poured down like rain, and resin dripped in rivers. Lieutenant Mek shouted over the din. "The charges! We have to use the charges!" Specialist Kavita nodded, already priming the explosives. "Set them along the central mass. When they go off, it will tear the heart apart." Talia warriors formed a defensive circle while humans dashed forward, planting charges into the creature's pulsing flesh. Each detonation rocked the chamber, drawing howls of agony from the mother. Sarethi stood at the forefront, her spear blazing as she held back the swarm. Her voice rang clear, unyielding. "For the Talia, for the sons, for life." Finally, the last charge was set. Elias gave the order, "Fall back, shields up, detonate on my mark." The strike team retreated toward the cavern's edge, fighting every step as the swarm pressed closer. Elias waited until the last warrior crossed into cover, then slammed his palm onto the detonator. A roar like the breaking of worlds filled the chamber. The mother erupted in fire and light, its colossal form splitting apart as explosions tore through its body. Chitin shattered, flesh ignited, molten ichor sprayed in torrents. The cavern shook with the fury of collapse, stalactites crashing down, walls splitting open. The swarm shrieked in agony as their heart was torn asunder. The mother gave one final, deafening cry, a sound that seemed to carry the rage of 1,000 lifetimes before its body collapsed in on itself, crushed beneath falling stone. The hive was dying. The strike force stumbled into the tunnels, the ground quaking beneath their boots. Flames and dust consumed the cavern behind them. Creatures fled in chaos, their cohesion broken. Without the mother's command, the swarm became a frenzy of disarray. At last, they burst into the open air of the ravine. The mountain loomed above, shuddering as though it too were dying. Plumes of fire and dust erupted from its peak. The warriors collapsed in exhaustion, gasping for breath. Many bore wounds, but they were alive. Against all odds, they had struck the heart. Sarethi leaned heavily on her spear, her luminous eyes fixed on the burning mountain. "It is done. The throne of dawn has fallen. The wound is closed." Elias stood beside her, sweat and dust streaking his face. He looked upon the collapsing hive and whispered, "No, It has only begun. We killed their mother. But what if there are more? Sarethi's expression hardened, but she did not look away. Then we will face them together. The mountain roared one final time as its peak collapsed, sending a plume of dust into the sky. The first victory had been won, but in the silence that followed, both Human and Talia knew the war was far from over. The mountain continued to burn for 3 full days. From the plains below, the survivors of the Talia watched the smoke rise like a funeral pyre. The people gathered on shattered ridges and riverbanks, their luminous eyes fixed upon the horizon. Some wept openly, others fell to their knees in prayer, and many stood in silence, unable to believe what they were seeing. Mount Isorith, the hive that had devoured their world for generations, was gone. The strike force had made camp in the valley south of the mountain. Their numbers were fewer now, 10 humans and 21 Talia warriors. The wounded lay in tents where human medics and Talia healers worked side by side, stitching torn flesh, binding fractures, and treating burns left by the swarm's spores. Captain Elias moved from tent to tent, offering what strength he could. He clasped hands, spoke quiet words, and listened to the grief of both his soldiers and the Talia warriors. The loss of each life weighed upon him, but he carried that weight silently, as he always had. Lieutenant Mek kept the perimeter secure, his rifle never far from reach. The collapse of the hive had scattered the devourers, but scattered did not mean gone. Packs of feral stragglers still roamed the foothills, attacking anything that moved. More than once, sentries returned with claw marks across their armor. Dr. Javed refused to sleep. Her hands worked ceaselessly, moving from patient to patient. When Elias tried to insist she rest, she fixed him with weary eyes. They need me more than I need dreams. Specialist Kavita spent her hours recalibrating the comm relay. Each attempt to reach the fleet ended in static. The mountain's collapse warped the ionosphere. It will take days for signals to stabilize. She cursed softly, then glanced toward the burning horizon. If we cannot call for extraction soon, we may be trapped here longer than we hoped. Among the Talia, the mood was mixed. There was mourning for the dead, but also a quiet hope, a trembling thing they scarcely dared to name. Sarethi walked among her people, speaking with each survivor, pressing her hand to their foreheads in blessing. Elias approached her one evening as the sun set in crimson light. She stood upon a ridge overlooking the burning mountain, her crystalline spear planted firmly in the soil beside her. "You are their anchor," Elias said softly. She turned her luminous gaze upon him. "I try to be, but I am also afraid. The mother is dead, but her children remain. Even now they crawl in the dark places. They may scatter, or they may gather again beneath a new will. I do not know which fate is worse." Elias folded his arms, staring at the plume of ash in the distance. "On Earth, when we cut the head off a serpent, the body still thrashes. It can still strike, even without thought. That is what we face now." Sarethi's eyes narrowed slightly. "You speak of Earth often, but only in fragments. Do your people also fight such endless hungers?" Elias hesitated. Memories rose unbidden, of wars fought not against monsters, but against themselves, of cities burning by human hands. He gave a small nod. "We have fought hungers of our own making. We survived them, barely." Sarethi studied him for a long moment, then looked back to the burning mountain. "Perhaps that is why you came to us. You know what it is to endure the impossible." On the 4th day, scouts returned with troubling news. They had ventured into the outer tunnels of the collapsed hive, searching for stragglers or wounded comrades. What they found instead was a chamber half buried by stone. Within it, rows of eggs, thousands. The news spread quickly through the camp. Panic rippled among the Talia. Some demanded that the humans burn the tunnels immediately. Others whispered that the eggs would hatch even without the mother, spilling new horrors into the world. A council was called at dusk. The humans sat on one side of the fire, the Talia on the other. Between them lay silence heavy with fear. Lieutenant Mek broke it first. "If those eggs hatch, we will face another swarm, and this time without the element of surprise. We cannot allow that." A Talia elder, her markings dim with age, leaned forward. You speak as though we have strength left to fight. We have none. Our warriors are broken, our homes ashes. We cannot endure another battle. Dr. Javed's voice rose, sharper than usual. Then we destroy the eggs before they hatch. Another Talia hissed in protest. What if the eggs cannot survive without the mother? What if they are already dead? To risk lives to destroy them may only waste what little strength we have left. Sarethi stood, her spear casting light across the circle. Fear binds us, but fear will not save us. If the eggs live, they are a knife at our throat. If they are dead, then destroying them will cost us little. We must act. Elias rose beside her. His voice was calm but firm. She is right. We end this now, not tomorrow, not when the swarm has gathered again. Now, the council ended with no dissent. The choice was made. The following morning, the strike force returned to the hive. The mountain had quieted, its peaks smoking faintly. The tunnels were half collapsed, filled with rubble and dust, but they pressed through until they reached the chamber the scouts had found. It was worse than the reports had said. The eggs filled the cavern, stretching farther than their lights could reach. They glowed faintly, pulsing in rhythm, as though they shared a single heartbeat. Within each translucent shell, shapes twitched and writhed. Some had already begun to claw against the inner membrane. The warriors stared in silence, a dread heavier than battle settling upon them. Lieutenant Mech raised his rifle, his jaw clenched. We burn them. Elias nodded. Do it. Flamethrowers roared to life, spewing fire across the cavern. The eggs writhed and screamed in a chorus of unearthly sound, their shells blackening and bursting. The air filled with smoke and the stench of burning flesh. Talia warriors added their spears to the blaze, their harmonics shattering rows of eggs into shards. It was merciless work, but it was necessary. When it was done, the cavern was silent. The glow was gone. The eggs were ash. Sarethi lowered her spear, her voice trembling. It is finished. Elias looked at the charred remains and shook his head. No, it is beginning. We killed one hive, one mother. But what if there are others on other worlds? What if this is not an end, but the first sign of something larger? The words hung heavy in the smoke-filled cavern. For the first time since the victory, hope faltered. That night, Elias sat alone at the edge of camp, staring at the stars. Somewhere beyond those points of light lay Earth, his home, though it felt impossibly far. Somewhere beyond them, perhaps more hives waited. Sarethi approached quietly and sat beside him. For a long time, neither spoke. Finally, she said, "Your people came as strangers. You fought beside us, bled beside us, and burned our nightmares from the roots. Whatever comes, we will not face it alone now." Elias glanced at her, then back at the stars. "I hope you are right, because if the swarm reaches beyond this world, we are going to need every ally we can find." Above them, the night sky seemed deeper than ever, as though hiding truths they were not yet ready to see. The comm relay crackled back to life on the 7th day. For hours, Specialist Kavita worked at the console, her hands sore from rewiring and recalibration. At last, the static gave way to the clean pulse of a long-range channel. Her shout carried across the camp. "Signal is restored." The announcement rippled through the survivors like a spark of hope. Humans gathered quickly, Talia not far behind. The chance to reach the fleet and to call for evacuation was a lifeline none had dared to believe would come so soon. Captain Elias approached the console, his face lit faintly by the glow of the screen. "Patch me through." Kavita keyed the command, and a thin voice filled the air. "This is the fleet vessel Resolute, holding orbit above Talia, receiving your transmission, ground team." Elias pressed the comm bead to his lips. "Resolute, this is Captain Elias Harrow. The hive is destroyed. Repeat, the hive is destroyed. Survivors secure at Southern Valley coordinates. Request immediate extraction." There was a pause, too long, then the voice returned, quieter now. "Captain, we have complications." Within hours, a shuttle descended through the smoke-laden sky, its thrusters stirring ash across the camp. The ramp lowered, and armored Marines stepped out, followed by a gaunt man in a gray officer's coat. His expression was tense, his eyes shadowed with sleeplessness. He saluted Elias sharply. "Commander Aiden Vey, Resolute." Elias returned the gesture. Report. Vay's gaze shifted toward the Talia gathered nearby, their luminous eyes watching in silence. We should speak privately, but Sarethi stepped forward, her spear gleaming faintly in the dusk. No, speak here. We are no longer separate in this war. Vay hesitated, then inclined his head. Very well, you should all hear this. Our orbiting patrols have scanned deep into the system. The swarm's presence does not end on this world. A hush fell, Vay continued. We found signs on 2 of the outer moons, buried structures, subterranean hives, dormant but alive. The signatures match what we detected from Mount Isorith before its collapse. A low murmur spread through the Talia, fear and despair mixed with fury. Lieutenant Mech spoke first. You are saying the swarm seeded itself beyond this planet. Vay nodded grimly, and not only here, long-range probes launched before the interference cleared have picked up faint energy spikes on neighboring systems, patterns too similar to dismiss. If these readings are correct, the Devourers are not local parasites. They are a galactic scourge. Sarethi's voice rang like iron across the camp. If that is true, then we are already at war beyond imagining. Dr. Javed shook her head in disbelief. But how? How could such creatures spread so far? Their mother was massive, but still a living thing bound to flesh and stone. How do they cross the void? Vay's lips pressed into a hard line. That is what troubles us most. Our scans found traces of metal integrated into hive structures. Alloys that do not occur naturally, something manufactured. The words sank deep like hooks. Elia's face darkened. You are saying they are not only animals, they build. Vay's silence was answer enough. That night the camp did not rest. Fires burned low, but no one slept easily. Talia whispered prayers beneath the stars, while humans tightened weapons and checked ammunition, as if battle could descend from the sky at any moment. Elias walked the perimeter until he found Sarethi seated on a ridge, her spear across her knees. She stared at the heavens, her markings glowing softly. You heard him, Elias said quietly. This may be larger than either of us imagined. Sarethi did not turn her head. My people believed our world was cursed, that the hunger was punishment for ancient sins. Now I see we were only one wound in a body scarred across the stars. Elias sat beside her. If the swarm spreads from system to system, then sooner or later it reaches Earth as well. We cannot allow that. Her gaze shifted toward him at last. Then your people and mine must bind our strength. Alone we are prey. Together perhaps we can be hunters. Elias let out a slow breath. The hardest part will not be convincing you. It will be convincing my own kind. Humans, we are not always eager to see beyond ourselves. Sarethi's luminous eyes softened with something almost like a smile. You came here, you bled for us. That is more than many would have done. Perhaps it will be enough to begin. They sat in silence then, 2 warriors from worlds apart, staring at a sky that seemed suddenly darker than before. The next day, a decision was made. The survivors would not yet leave the surface. The fleet could not risk spreading infection if even one egg or spore remained hidden in their bodies or armor. Instead, samples would be taken from the hive ruins and studied aboard quarantine vessels. Teams were formed, mixed squads of human scientists and Talia seers working side by side. They descended once more into the tunnels, carrying instruments and spears alike. What they found chilled them. Beneath layers of ash and rubble lay structures unmistakably crafted. Walls of fused chitin reinforced with metal beams, chamber doors sealed with something like mechanical locks, control nodes that pulsed faintly, wires running into the flesh of the hive as though the living tissue itself had been engineered to serve. Dr. Javed touched one of the locks, her voice hushed. This is not natural growth. This is design. Kavita knelt beside a twisted beam, scraping residue into a vial, and not a design of their own. This alloy is too refined. Someone or something guided their evolution. Elias's jaw tightened. Then the question is who? When the teams emerged again, the camp was no longer only a place of survival. It had become a place of reckoning. The Talia sang mournful songs beneath the fading suns, voices low and haunting. Humans sent encrypted reports to the fleet, each line of data carrying dread. Elias gathered the core of both groups around the fire. The light flickered on faces drawn with exhaustion and fear. "We came here to fight one hive," he said. "We discovered a plague that stretches beyond worlds, but it is more than hunger. Someone shaped them, someone unleashed them. Until we know who, none of us are safe." Mayek's voice was hard. "If someone is using them as a weapon, then this war has only begun." Sarethi's spear flared faintly as she raised it. "Then let this be the dawn of alliance. From this world to the stars, we will fight as one." The fire crackled, casting long shadows. Around it, human and Talia faces reflected the same grim resolve. The sky above them was vast, silent, and watching. Somewhere within that silence, something stirred, and it was waiting. The camp was quieter now. The wounded had healed enough to travel, the grave were marked with stones and songs, and the fires no longer burned for mourning, but for warmth. Above, the fleet's ships shimmered faintly in orbit, their silhouettes sharp against the twin suns. For the Talia, who had never looked upon vessels that left the sky itself, the sight carried both awe and dread. Captain Elias stood at the center of the survivors, his armor scorched but whole. Sarethi stood at his side, her spear glimmering like starlight caught in crystal. "This is not the end," Elias said, his voice carrying across the valley. "We have slain one hive, but we know now the swarm is greater than this world. We do not yet know who shaped them or why, but we know this: they can be fought, they can be stopped, and if we stand together, they will not devour us." A murmur ran through the Talia, swelling into harmonics that shimmered in the air. It was not mourning this time, but a vow. Their voices wove with the silence of the humans, binding the two groups in something deeper than words. In the days that followed, preparations for departure began. The humans shared supplies, medicines, and knowledge with the Talia, while the Talia shared songs of resilience, teachings of their seers, and weapons crafted from crystal that resonated with sound. The valley became a forge of beginnings. Mixed teams practiced together, human rifles harmonizing with Talia resonance spears, tactics reshaped into something neither culture had ever dreamed of. Dr. Javed worked beside Talia healers, comparing techniques. She marveled at their use of sound and light to knit wounds, and they marveled at her knowledge of chemicals and microbes. "We thought of our songs as spirit," one healer said softly, "but perhaps spirit and science are the same river, flowing in different tongues." Mayek, once distrustful of every shadow, began to spar openly with Talia warriors, his laughter ringing through the camp when their spears sent his boots skidding across the dirt. He rose each time, dusting himself off, his grin sharper than his rifle's edge. And Elias, who had carried the weight of command like iron chains, found in Sarethi a mirror of strength. At night they stood together on the ridges, speaking little, their silence woven with a bond deeper than battle. On the 10th day, the shuttle returned. Its engines thundered over the valley, sending ripples through the grass. The ramp lowered, and Commander Vey waited at its head. His expression was still drawn with worry, but his words carried a note of respect. "Captain Sarethi, the fleet has orders. We will return to Earth with what we have learned. The swarm is not a local threat, it is a galactic one. Our leaders must decide the next steps." Sarethi stepped forward, her voice strong. "And my people, will you leave us once more to fend for ourselves?" Vey hesitated, then shook his head. "No, a garrison will remain. Supplies, medicine, and protection. This is not a war you fight alone anymore." Elias looked at Sarethi. She met his gaze, her eyes luminous with both sorrow and hope. "Then this is the beginning," she said softly. Before the humans departed, a final gathering was held. The Talia raised a monument from stone and crystal, a spire that caught the suns and split their light into colors that danced across the valley. At its base were carved the names of the fallen, Talia and human alike. Elias placed his gauntleted hand upon the stone. "These names will not fade. Wherever we go, whatever we face, we carry them with us." Sarethi lifted her spear, striking it against the stone. A deep harmonic resonated, filling the valley with a sound like the heartbeat of the world itself. The Talia joined in, their voices weaving around the note, carrying it upward into the sky. The humans bowed their heads. Though they did not know the words, they understood the meaning. It was not mourning, it was promise. When the shuttle rose at last, Elias stood at its ramp and looked down upon the valley. Sarethi raised her spear in farewell, her eyes fixed upon him. Neither spoke. They did not need to. The valley shrank below, the monument gleaming. The survivors gathered around it like stars around a flame. Elias turned to face the void. Ahead lay Earth, questions unanswered, and a war that might one day engulf the galaxy. But in his heart, one truth had already taken root. Humanity was not alone. And for the first time since the war had begun, that truth brought not fear but hope. Weeks later, as the Resolute traversed the quiet between stars, a signal was intercepted. It was faint, fragmented, carried on a frequency almost lost to background radiation. But its structure was unmistakable. Pulses, rhythms, patterns of hunger, not from the hives they had destroyed, from elsewhere, far away. And woven faintly into that signal, beneath the layers of static, was something more, a code, artificial, deliberate. Someone had taught the swarm to sing, and someone somewhere was still listening.